What an amazing day today has been for us. I've got to tell you, I'm joined today by one of my colleagues, Dr. Christine Villanueva, who runs all of the strategy and brand marketing that we do at the agency. And we got a chance to sit in with one of the classes, Dr. Ball's class on brand marketing, and the focus that she was talking about was really around multicultural. And so it was absolutely a joy to be with these students and to be with Professor Ball. And I will tell you, if there's any question ever about why Babson is great, you only need to sit with a student for 2 minutes and talk to the faculty, and it becomes very, very clear what it is that makes this institution so absolutely special. A quick couple of stories to tell you. First, the other reason I'm really excited about being here was that, I got this call from Babson, and they talked about the program. And they said, look, one of the things we want to talk about is culture and how that connects to entrepreneurship and how it actually connects into innovation. And I got to tell you something. I was in the office by myself. I was doing my happy dance. I was like, oh my gosh, finally, someone is seeing those connections. Someone wants to talk about something that I'm so passionate about. So we had a staff meeting. I run down to the staff. I was like, oh my gosh, you guys are not going to believe what's going to happen. Babson wants to do this thing about entrepreneurship and culture, and they've asked me to talk about it. I was like, well, the staff, because that is so much a part of who we are and what we do every day, and they're really, really excited. And there's always one person. You have to have one person that keeps you grounded, right? So there's one person in the office, I'm not going to name names, Juan Bonilla, and he's a great guy. He said, look, I know how excited you get. I know how passionate you are about this, and sometimes you can go a little bit long, so you got to make sure you keep it short. You got to keep it kind of focused. And I was like, you know what? That's a really good note. I get it. I understand. So what I've asked the production folks here to do, just so you know they're not being rude, I've asked them to give me a little music cue when I'm getting close to the end of my presentation, if I'm getting too close. I figured you're like, Babson, entrepreneurship, it's kind of like the Academy Awards for entrepreneurs. I'm going to get played off the stage just like they do in the Academy Awards. So I'm going to go with that. When you hear the music, no, it's not a mistake. It's actually been planned. The other reason I am excited about being here, and it's amazing to see Dr. Sorensen here, because when I was a student at Babson, Dr. Sorensen was the president of the school, and I had an opportunity to participate in the Founders Day program. And it was in this very room that I got a chance to introduce an entrepreneur who happened to be a student at Babson, Gustavo Cisneros. And I see actually the host that was here too. Stand up, you gotta stand up. It's so funny that we're all here at the same time. So it feels great to come back to home and back to Babson and be able to kind of celebrate something that I'm really excited about. I think it's really important, for entrepreneurs or for any company to get grounded in why it is that you are doing what you do. And there are a lot of people you talk to different folks, and there's a really amazing author named Simon Sinek, and he wrote a book called It Starts With Why. And one of the things that he talks about is organizations that are really successful versus the organizations that aren't as successful. And one of the connections that he saw with those companies that were really successful is that everyone from the CEO down to the receptionist understood exactly why they were there. They understood the purpose, they understood their mission. And I started thinking about that, and I said, okay, well, when I'm coming to Babson, I should actually get grounded and reframe for the audience why it is that I'm so excited about culture and multicultural marketing. And I started to go back and I said, well, when was that? And what happened? And it dawned on me that I really started getting engaged in it when I was in high school. And one of the things that happened in high school for me was, in history class, I loved history class. I loved learning about what was happening back then and how it would project to the future. And But in our history classes, they really didn't talk about black history that much. They talked about black history in terms of slavery, but they didn't talk about it in its current form. And so I would go home and my mom and dad would kind of fill in those gaps. They would talk to me a little bit about civic leaders and people in our community that actually made a huge difference. And one of the people that they talked about was a gentleman by the name of Bayard Rustin. How many people are familiar with Bayard Rustin? Yeah, a few. Let me give you a little bit of background about Bayard. Bayard is considered to be the lost prophet in the civil rights effort. He was the person who actually introduced Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to Gandhi and helped Dr. King understand the ways of passive resistance. He also was the architect behind the famous March on Washington, where Dr. King gave his I Have a Dream speech. And one of the things that Bayard had talked about that really hit home for me, he had this amazing quote. He said, you know, what every community needs is a group of angelic troublemakers. And I thought about that. You know exactly what that means, right? When you hear the word angelic troublemakers. And I thought about what that meant, and I realized at that point that that's something that I've always wanted to be. I wanted to be that guy that helped move things forward in a way that was challenging the status quo, that was a little bit disruptive but respectful. And so it's in that spirit of being an angelic troublemaker that we started to adapt some of that personality. At our agency, we call ourselves enlightened rebels. People who understand the data, who are really passionate about, moving things forward and disrupting the current state of affairs, but for the purpose of making things bigger and better for our clients. We believe fundamentally that the world is made stronger or more powerful through the lens of diversity. And, part of what we wanted to do when we started this company was we wanted to make sure that we were facing the world the way the world faced us. So we were very purposeful in the types of people that we were hiring. We wanted to make sure it was a wide range of diverse candidates, men, women, black, white, Hispanic, Asian, you name it. We knew that it was important for us, not just because it made us feel better, but we really genuinely believed that if we had a bunch of diverse points of view around a table, we would ultimately get new ways of thinking. We would also ultimately get to a point where innovation, which comes from challenging one another, would be able to thrive. One of the things that is really important for us, and one of the things that I think not just for our agency, but I guess for any leader, is to make sure that you create an environment that allows the people that work for you to bring their full and complete self to the office every day. And there's a business reason for that. Part of the reason we are really focused on making sure that everyone feels comfortable about bringing their true self to the office is because the second that they stop worrying about covering or code switching or doing any of the things that make them feel like they can't be themselves, they stop worrying about that and they take all of that energy and start focusing it in on the things that we need to do to help make our clients' business grow forward. So we ask everyone in our company to come together and to make their own I am lists. So if I would ask any of you guys here in the room to pull out a piece of paper and start writing down what makes you, you, you'd come up with an amazing list. Some of those things would be absolutely unique to you. And then when you start to go through that list, you might find out that there are some things that are very common with the person sitting next to you. And part of our job as leaders is to make sure we have the folks in our agencies feel strong enough and comfortable enough to come in and be who they are every day. So here's my I am list. I'm an uncle, I'm a traveler, I'm a husband, I'm a son, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a supporter of the arts, and my God, I'm a germaphobe, I'm sorry. I'm working through it. Purell is one of my favorite friends. But the reality is I'm who I am, and I have to make sure that I encourage other people to be who they are in our space. There was a time when we were more siloed, where we stayed in our own lanes, we stuck with our own kind, we kind of did what we had to do. But now, more than ever, those lanes and lines are connected in ways that we never imagined. Some of it is being driven by technology, some of it is being driven by an awakening of who we should be and what we should be doing. But the truth is, we're living in this era of intersections, right? That thrust people together with common and sometimes conflicting interests. And we find ourselves spending more and more time focusing on those things that kind of connect us, not only to ourselves, but to others. It's one of the beautiful things about diversity and inclusion. Diversity and inclusion, for a long time, gets a really bad rap, and I can understand why, because sometimes it's not executed the right way. What we do at our agency is we kind of redefine what diversity and inclusion is. We think of D&I very differently. We think of D&I as disruption and innovation. And I'll tell you why. Let me give you an example. If you have kids, or when you were a kid, if you remember what it was like to be a kid, the kids are genuinely curious. They're constantly asking, why this, why that? And we're usually telling kids not to interrupt and not to be disrespectful. But the reality is, there's some upside to that disruption. Part of the reason that there's some upside to that disruption is because it breaks us out of patterns. It breaks us out of the blind spots that normally keep us from thinking through the bigger opportunities that exist for us. It's not just the thing that I feel good about, it has actually some business results. If you look, McKinsey did a research study. They found that companies that were more gender diverse were 15% more likely to outperform their peers. In that same study, they looked at ethnicity, and they found out that companies that were more ethnically diverse were 35% more likely to outperform their peers. Harvard Business Review did a study, and they found that leaders who gave diverse voices an equal opportunity to speak up were 2 times more likely to unleash the value proposition of those insights. Employees who worked in a speak up environment were 3.5 times more likely to contribute to their full potential. I'm a little bit of a nerd. I love reading Scientific American, and one of the things that they did was they did this entire series on diversity and the power that diversity has to help propel a business forward. And one of the things that they kind of helped you understand was the reason why it did that. The fact of the matter is, when you surround yourself with people who aren't like you, who talk differently, who think differently, who've experienced life differently, what they do is they try to marshal more resources to convince you that their point of view is the right point of view. So when you're with a bunch of people who are very different and they're all working on the same type of problem solving, what happens is the IQ of the group becomes stronger and bigger. And the opportunities to find those nuggets of innovation become greater for you. And I got to tell you, what their ultimate conclusion was that if your end goal is excellence, then diversity and inclusion is an essential ingredient. It is not a nice to do anymore. It's going to be a mandatory if in fact you want to move yourself forward. So let's kind of recap a little bit. Diversity and inclusion, let's stop thinking about it in its traditional sense. Let's start thinking about it in its new kind of way of looking at it, which really leads to disruption and innovation. Disruption and innovation ultimately get you better client results. Better client results end up getting you better business results. I can promise you, I've never had a client ask me to be less innovative. I've never had a staff member saying, you know what, I don't want to do innovation anymore. I want to continue to do the things the same way over and over and over. So that sounds good on paper, but let's face it, it ain't easy, right? The fact of the matter is, change is often really difficult. We're human beings. We like to do things the same way because it makes us feel comfortable. We don't like the unknown. Although I will tell you, one of the things about an entrepreneur is the curiosity and the willingness to go into the unknown and to discover those things that we might not have done if we didn't step outside of our comfort zone. So part of what we have to do is we have to have the courage to collide, the courage to go out and try something that we've never done before. I think of, I mentioned Courage to Collide to someone, and I said, it's like these two powerful forces coming together, and this explosion happens, and all of the bright lights that sparkle that moment up there, that's where the innovation is. That's where we're kind of reaching for. And they were like, I get it, but I think of that explosion in a negative way. I said, okay, here's this. Suppose we think about rethinking about the word collide. Let's take a kaleidoscope, and you look at that kaleidoscope, and you're going through it, and any one of those geometric images is gorgeous. But then when you twist it and turn it a little bit, the mosaic, the beauty of what you're looking at becomes even more beautiful. And that's how we have to start thinking about colliding. The challenge is you've got to learn to collide faster. One of the things that happens in the tech companies is they understand this. They understand that innovation really requires that you try new things. You go out and you get new ideas, and if it doesn't work, you learn from it and you move on. We're navigating the new, we're getting there faster, but we can get there faster and better if, in fact, we start to lean into the strengths and the culture of the people that work for us. I tell everyone, don't back up or stand still. Remember that, we heard the music. Okay, well, yeah, this is great. Thank you very much. Okay, so I mentioned to people, don't back up or stand still, because what happens when you do that, you get gridlock, and gridlock ultimately is the death for innovation. There's a time to yield, but that time to yield is about listening and not lessening, so you've got to listen to those cultures. And by all means, you've got to have the courage to collide.